This video is brought to you by the Teaching and Learning Center in association with the Educational Technology Development Center. Today's guest is Parker Crutchfield, Director of Research and Assistant Professor at the Missouri School of Dentistry and Oral Health. We are here today to discuss Parker's use of polling in his preclinical educational setting. Parker has been using polling in one form or another for the past several years. Interviewing Parker today is Susan Swogger, Liaison Librarian for the Missouri School of Dentistry and Oral Health and the Educational Technology Development Center representative for the Missouri campus.
So my first question, can you tell me what first sparked your interest in polling your students?
So one of the courses I teach is ethics, clinical ethics, and the ethics education literature, especially in healthcare ethics, suggests that the way that students best learn is through analysis of cases, rather than listening to a lecture or writing papers or anything like that. So it was reading that literature that first got me to use polling in the ethics classroom.
And how does that look in your classroom? What do you use it in what way?
So I use it for case analysis, to use their responses as jumping off points for more in-depth discussion about the cases.
And so what types of polling software and student response systems have you used in the past that have worked well in that situation? What quality makes them the most useful for you?
So I've used Lecture Tools, which was web-based, and then I've used Turning Point, and the physical clickers here. I like them each equally. They each have their own merits and demerits. I liked Lecture Tools because the students could use any device. They could just bring their iPad or their computer or their smartphone, whatever, and they could dial in. On the other hand, when you don't have to actually give them a physical thing, it seemed like participation was lower. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I like the physical clickers, because if you give it to them, it seems to me like they're more likely to use it rather mm-hmm. than just relying on their own motivation. If you give them the clicker itself, it seems like they'll use it more.
Yeah, keeping people physically engaged in things definitely helps keep them mentally engaged. And having things fail can cause a huge disruption.
Yeah, so I have a class of 42, which is the class size at Mosdo. I'll wait until I get 35 responses, assuming that 7 people will either not be paying attention enough to respond or their clickers won't work. Because when they're all clicking at the same time, it's hard to tell whether your own clicker is working.
That's true. How much time would you say that you invest in creating the polling questions for the class, and how much time does getting the classroom set up, sorted out take?
Each set of questions takes between 45 minutes and 2 hours, depending on the number of questions and the number of possible answer choices. Setting up the classroom with Lecture Tools, or web-based, it took just a few minutes to load up the web page. With Turning Point, it takes a few more minutes because there's a separate software system that you have to open up. With Turning Point, you can embed it into PowerPoint, but I don't like to do that. I like using the standalone software, and that takes a few more minutes. And then there's the class time of handing the clickers out and collecting them at the end.
So how do your students respond to it? Do they seem to like it?
They do seem to like it. It's usually the thing that they say they like best about my ethics courses. Out of 42 students, I am getting 35, 36 people participating, so that's pretty high level of engagement. But what I really notice is that the students' level of discussion, their enthusiasm, and their ability to reason critically about difficult ethical cases is increased.
That's excellent. So do you think that it helps them to be more creative and engage in more critical thinking skills in the classroom?
It definitely does. If I were to just bring this case up, not in the context of polling, 5 people that would engage in the discussion, it's the same 5 people that would be talking during every discussion, and we would go over the sort of the well-worn areas of the ethics of the case, while the other 35 students tune out or tune in and tune out. With the polling software, say for any given session, at least 50% of the people are active in the discussion.
So when during your lectures do you find it most helpful to poll the class? Do you have a consistent pattern that works best for you?
What I like to do, and it's not, is to introduce a short period of the theory, and then we'll try to apply that looking at the actual cases, and then discuss those cases using the polling software. So that's what I usually like to do. I usually like to introduce the theory behind the ethical decision making for the cases prior to the polling, and then just do that for every content area.
So how do you feel that this sort of immediate response type of group assessment impacts the way that you teach overall?
Well, rather than go off on a tangent, or just sit there and pontificate about philosophical ethics for an hour, it helps me stay on topic and continue to discuss the issues that matter most to the students.
Which is always useful, especially with something like that, where it's very easy to wander around.
It is very easy to wander around, yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Parker. I much appreciate your willingness to talk to us about this.
Sure, my pleasure.